Sam Nicholson was planning to test a group of HD cameras together, and he had a pretty in-depth test planned, and Mike was going to be involved in it, so I immediately asked if I could, join in and just hang around and check it out and see if I could learn something. And that's how I sort of ran into Sam and all the guys at Stargate Digital. And two prototype, I suppose, or beta tested, or beta model F-35s were brought out. A couple of engineers from Sony. An F-23 was also included in the group in order to, make side-by-side comparisons of all the systems. Great image quality. 35 millimeter size chip. 35 millimeter depth of field. We tried to use all the filmmaking techniques you would use, including, control of depth of field. We had master primes. We shot wide open with the master primes. And our little production shows up in the morning at 7 or so, and it starts to snow. It snows all day long in March into Tehachapi. So that kind of got us by surprise. You can see in the film that that's all the real thing. It was pretty darn cold. None of us were really ready for it to be that cold. It was very cold. But then at the end of the day, a long day, about 12 hours, we stop, we break for dinner, we all have a big meal together. And it's about, 8 o'clock, and Sam says, all right, let's go out and shoot the night scene. And it's the rodeo scene with the herding the calves in the rodeo ring. And so we go out there, and honest to God, I think it was 10 degrees. Seriously, 10 degrees out there. Everybody had everything they owned on. The cameras were out there. All we had on the cameras were just, some rain cover type stuff on them, just thin stuff. Again, simple, very sketchy lighting. Just I think a 6K, or maybe it was that same 4K PAR in the background, straight down the tube on my camera, straight down the lens. The second camera, I think, was right off to the left and a little bit off the light, but essentially only maybe 8 feet away, getting different angles and different sizes. The tack room was one 4K PAR outside the door. There was a window there with just some natural daylight, and then there was a small little, there was an incandescent just picking him up when he came close to us at a point where his hat was hanging. We had 3 cameras. That's, 2 F-35s and an F-23. So, we spent an entire day scouting camera positions for 3 cameras for 8 races. So you staff each camera, and you go out, you scout the location, which was Santa Anita, set up with sticks, hi-hats, handheld equipment. The camera positions were, planned as carefully as we could. I mean, we tried to avoid having somebody in the 16 minutes between races, I believe. We tried to avoid have somebody going from one end of the track all the way around and out into the other end of the track and come in and then have time to set up and get set up by the starting gate or something. We were up in the judges' booths, outside the track on platforms, up in the stands, out in the middle, way off in a turn on. You had to come all the way around the outside of the whole facility and come back in. And it just was a great example of mobility, speed, and integration with all the equipment you needed to bring. We had speed ramps assigned to different shots and different setups, depending if they were some motion across camera or if they're coming right at us. And speed ramps were spread out and scattered through different shots and different setups. So all the cameras did speed ramps of different kinds. Basically your standard one was come flying around the turn as fast as I can, and as I get into like a 3/4, hit the ramp, camera system would just hit the button, and you'd get an on-camera slow down to 50 frames right there. We try to use some sharp, clippy, tight shutter angles or shutter speeds, I guess is the proper thing to say. And when the horse's hooves were trotting, they'd be throwing up clods of dirt. There was no strobing; it was just sharp and crystal clear. I don't believe I really saw any motion artifacts, any distracting motion artifacts that were any kind of a problem at all. I think the lighting in the barn, honestly, I think it was just a 2K and a 4K, if I remember correctly. 2K PAR and a 4K PAR. Use a little smoke to kind of smooth out the contrast a little bit. We wanted to just test the low-end detail and the noise levels and the blacks and the shadow areas. And also, when you have all the blacks in the shadow areas and you have a lot of burned out or highlights, we wanted to see how well it would hold the highlights. So essentially, it was a test of the camera range. We had excellent sensitivity in the dark, shadow areas. Good dynamic range. If you were in that barn, you might have been shooting a 200 or a 400 ASA tungsten or so film stock. I think that's what we were balanced out at, was tungsten, and the daylight came in kind of blue on us. Maybe we used a little extra filtration because you're at 400 ASA and we want to be wide open, so we were running some extra glass in there. Ojai was shot. They needed a location to kind of finish the story, and it needed to be a lush green, summer-looking spot, and we found that location in Ojai. The interesting thing we did there was we brought a piece of equipment called the Ultimate Arm, and the guys at Ultimate Arm were interested in interfacing the F-35 onto that and seeing how it worked and just having the experience of having it on it. So they brought their rig out for a day, and we shot some traveling stuff off the Ultimate Arm. It really was simple, quick, nothing unusual. The deck was remote mounted in the back of the car. Just reached and hit a button and rolled it. All the video, all the standard def video monitors in the insert car, and there's 3 or 4 of them, were all fed off of our feed, and they worked fine. And I'm pretty much a big fan of shooting in the log mode on these cameras, because from what I've read and what I've tried to learn, that's as close to using it in a film style. I don't come from a video background where they like to be able to paint their images and control their contrast, and when they reshoot it, they pretty much feel that they're locked into that, and it's pretty much a finished image when they hand the tape over with maybe a little bit of room for correction. I prefer it to think of it as an electronic negative, and if you think of a 35mm negative, you put your exposure where you want it. You set your exposure at the level you want, and don't lose the detail that you want later, and go ahead and crush or blow out the detail that you don't want. Essentially, when we went out shooting, we just worked like a film camera. If you took your light meter and it said an F4 or T4, you put the 4 on the lens, you look in the finder, and honestly, it was very close. But I will say with the F-35, image quality, beautiful. Tried and true, solid Sony technology. Everything worked on these beta cameras. Really never an issue. The biggest issues we had were we needed a little explanation about a couple of procedures on setting things, but the camera is very simplified as far as the controls and the menus. Incredible.